I'm Mel Stewart, and this is a GMM Podcast. Joining me today, we have a leader among leaders in the sport of swimming. We have a man who took over one of the most storied clubs in our sport at a time in which it was really in peril. And he rebranded it, developed it, shepherded it to being the biggest swimming club in the United States. This club has produced countless Olympians and Olympic coaches. Today, we're talking to the CEO of Nation's Capital, Tom Ugast. Hey, buddy. It's good to see you.
How you doing, Mel? Great to see you.
I feel ashamed because I feel like I should have had you on long ago. So I apologize for not.
No problem. I sort of try to fly under the radar. I don't need, swim, and you. I just try to stay out of the press.
You know who's not staying out of the press? Mike Koleber at Nitro and Krista Davis at SwimAtlanta. They're good. They're like, let's do this. They're into it. So you got to step up, Tom.
Okay, I'm sorry. I will try to step up. I'm not as fun as Koleber. I mean, I'm not teaching swim lessons to adults and running his stuff down in Austin, but we're just doing our little thing up here in the nation's capital.
I love this little thing. So everyone understands this. You're the CEO, Nation's Capital. My understanding is you have 2,800 registered swimmers. Is that accurate? Is that correct?
So, we run a competitive team of approximately 20. It'll be interesting to see. We're up about 10% so far this year, probably finish up about 2,100 USA Swimming registered competitive swimmers. Then we have a swim school and we have a developmental program at many of the sites if we have the lane space. So probably all total, we're working with 2,800 to 3,000 young children.
2,800 to 3,000. That makes you the biggest. Year over year, it's always NCAP. Is that by design? Is that something that you want? Is that something that you're shooting for? Is that a feather in your cap? Do you want to own the business?
I want to pay the bills. I want to be able to pay our coaches and pay the pool rents. It's not about being bigger. It's about being better, right? I think I watched some of the podcasts you did with Mike, and I haven't watched Chris's yet, but, things change in the country, and especially after COVID, and how committed kids are and what they're doing. And I see a lot of clubs doing 1 day a week, 2 day a week programs, not pushing the competitive side. And I think we have tried to stay focused on, we're a competitive USA swimming club, and our vision is to develop swimmers to the highest level of the sport that we can get them. That being said, we still have programs that we can run 1 day a week. We run a developmental program on Sundays at 3 of our sites that just work with kids that want to do once a week. Parents want them involved in sports, and we try to teach their technique. And if we can get, some of them to go over to the team, great. But there's a need for that. So we try to, and we run a swim school out of American University, which helps run the club because it's the amount of time you have to purchase in lane rental is very expensive, and running a swim school just helps on the bottom line. The margins are much larger in that than they are in the club business. So it's trying to have the right mix, and the coaches that want to do the competitive side or the developmental side, part-timers that are teachers that have the time on Sunday to teach kids how to swim.
The interesting part for us within the USA swimming ecosystem is, okay, you have this developmental program. How big is that just in terms of the numbers? Because you were saying 2,800 to 3,000. How many are developmental?
Probably 400.
So you're 400. What percentage of that 400 can you introduce to the sport, teach these base level skills, and we absorb them into our culture?
Once we get them in there, they're coming back. I talk about this, something I learned in business. It's cradle to grave, right? Start them off young and keep them all the way up until they're 18. That helps pay the bills. You can keep getting a new customer is a lot more expensive than keeping a current customer. So how do we make sure we're doing what we need to do for these families? I tell my coaches all the time, our customers are our parents, not the athletes, because the parents are paying the bill. So let's figure out what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that they see that their kids are having a good time and learning and getting better.
A part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast is I'm aware that our registration was flat. down 4.6% 2023. That's USA Swimming registration. Essentially flat in 2024. We only had 481 swimmers. And I'm trying to understand the business of club coaching and at the grass levels and where the store window meets your potential customer. I'm trying to understand that more. At 400 developmental, you're saying you can roll them up. And if, just out of curiosity, do you need that 400 to help pay for everybody else? Do you need?
No, not on the developmental side. The once a week programs I try to price, efficiently, right? So if a kid wants to swim once a week, it's, at the most $800 for the year, right? And that's every Sunday for 40 weeks. So the per splash is not terrible.
So a small piece of the business.
Yep.
But it is a feeder.
But needed. I mean, we have, we want to serve, we don't want to be an elitist club. Yes, we've had Katie go through the program, Phoebe Bacon, Aaron, we have three. The thing I look at, as we looked at the last couple Olympics, we were very blessed and lucky in 2020 how many athletes we had on that Olympic team. And you look back, Iner Selskar, Andrew Wilson came through our program, Katie, Phoebe, Aaron Gemmel. So we're lucky in that respect, right? Not every club can say that. And you look back at how many gold medalists we've had over the years. Dolan and Berriman, surprised you didn't swim for us.
Just for everybody out there listening, Tom has known Katie since she was a child, and he's referencing Katie Ledecky, the greatest female swimmer of all time. I think if anybody wants to argue against that, well, we can have that argument.
Yep, do that another time.
And we're recording this podcast today after her gutsy anchor in that 4x2, where Team USA won the silver at World Championships, but she really made up the difference after that third leg. Pretty astounding, but that's par for the course.
Yeah, she's a gutsy woman. I've watched her be able to grow up, and remember when she was 13 going to 2012 in London, seeing her win that. And, that was when we as a club were going through a little bit of our own turmoil, but just watching her do what she did was just so gratifying.
Good timing.
Yeah. No, knock on wood. Yeah.
Good timing. And I don't want to dive deep on this, but it's like, I think about the things that you've gone through. I want to talk a little bit about the private sector in a few minutes.
Okay.
But you came out of the private sector. You became the COO of the team. Yeah. And then it was Curl-Burke. Curl-Burke had an implosion because of the face, and the coach of the team had an issue that was something that we dealt with as a sport. And this was, and you took over and you rebranded and kept this storied program going and now thriving. So you went through that.
Yeah.
And if you want to explain any of that, I'm kind of curious about that experience and how you managed that and how you managed the pandemic. Were there similarities? Were there, these are big challenges in your club.
Yeah, I would say there's similarities, and it was gut-wrenching and stressful on both parts, different when you're dealing with the situation we were dealing with Rick Curl, who was a good friend of mine, and none of us, Jeff King, Pete Morgan, myself, that were all involved. I was started with the club first back in 1980 when Curl Swim Club was around, and I was a summer league coach and with a very large team, and Rick asked me to come and coach for them. I was working in the printing industry at that time, so I'd finish work and come over there and work with the 8 and unders. Me and a gentleman by the name of Kerry Ellett, who's been around a long time, getting paid, I think, $400 a month to coach a couple hours a day. Back then, you couldn't make a living being a swim coach, right? But that's when I first got involved, and then I went off and had a career in printing and publishing, and kept in touch with all those guys because they were friends. We spent a lot of time on the pool deck during those times. And when everything sort of imploded in 2012 and the story came out about Rick and one of the swimmers, all of us were devastated. But I remember one meeting we had that I told you about, where Pete Morgan, who was at that point, the head coach of the entire club. I have one coach that sort of sits over the competitive excellence side of what we do, and Pete's been doing that for years. But he said in a meeting, we condemn the act, but we don't condemn the man. And, we all believed in that, but we had to change what we were doing. Rick had to be out of swimming. But none of the kids on the team at that point had anything to do with what happened back in 1982 or 83. So I felt it was my duty to try to keep this club together. And I have to say, as much bad news as it was, I mean, USA Swimming was very good at working with me to try to figure out how we do it. I lost a couple pools because of it. Some private schools that didn't want to be associated with the club at that point. And I understood that. So we figured out how to keep those kids involved by moving around, putting them at different sites and making it work. And then within a year, those pools saw what we had done and put us back in. So it was a lot of talking to parents and letting them berate me, understandably for what was in the news. But we recovered from it because these coaches were dedicated to their kids to coach them. It had nothing to do with what happened with Rick in the early 80s.
But you were coming out of the private sector. You came in as chief operating officer, so you had this skill set. My understanding in the private sector, you had a 200-member team. You had a real professional career, and it sounds like you brought that skill set to the club.
I hope I did, but I also had a lot of help. I had parents on that team that we're in D.C., right? So you have lawyers and people in the consulting business that do a lot of crisis management, and had a number of step up and were willing to help make sure that we could do, because they saw what their kids got out of the program, right? And they didn't know Rick at all. And once we changed from Curl-Burke, we went to Kubu for the summer, and then we came back out to Nation's Capital Swimming. I think they all stood up, and luckily, knock on wood, having Katie win a gold medal that summer didn't hurt us too bad.
It did not hurt at all. I just remember the rebrand, and I was like, Nation's Capital. This makes sense. This is what you should be. They're going to own it. Just so everybody out there knows, I was on a national team for 12 years. 8 of the years, my roommate was Mike Behrman. So I was very close with and we swam through the 80s and 90s. So where we know all the names involved and had relationships with everybody and all these athletes who came through this program.
Yeah. And your friend and your mentor, was Jeremy younger than you?
Jeremy was younger. Jeremy and I swam at the University of Tennessee, and Jeremy, of course, is coaching now and successful and doing extremely well. But you can probably,
over the years, as Pete has worked, I wanted to get Jeremy in, so I had Pete sort of mentor him, and now Jeremy is the head coach of the team and doing a great job helping the other coaches. He just is a great head coach.
Jeremy, Olympic medalist Jeremy Lin, he can do it all. Breaststroker. He has ugly facial hair like me, depending on the day, depending on the week. But the point of me asking that question was to say that was a challenging moment.
It was a challenge.
Very challenging moment.
I don't want to relive the summer of 2012. I can tell everybody that. Yeah.
But I think it tells us a lot about our character when we suffer really challenging moments and we come through it. Did that prepare you? Because the pandemic felt like, the pandemic was for a member organization where you need water time and you got to keep that community together. How did that experience?
It really did prepare me, because I knew, look, I'm not going to let this club fall apart because of a pandemic, that we can survive in the water. And it took a lot of us getting together. I knew I was going to lose the universities that we trained at, the private schools that we trained at. They were going to shut down and not do anything. Luckily, the state of Virginia is a lot different than the state of Maryland or the District of Columbia. Virginia opened up pretty quickly, which allowed us to get back in. But I came up with, and I wasn't the only one, my coaches and my staff coming up, okay, what do we do? Well, we went to outdoor pools. I found outdoor pools that already had heaters in them. And I said, I want to rent this fall from you, and I'll pay you to be able to rent the pool. And these kids and the parents loved it because they wanted their kids having an activity and still doing it. So they were resilient. Even the little ones, that we had swimming outdoors in Washington, D.C. in December and January made it through. We'd cover the pools at night with light blankets that we could easily pull on and off. They all had heaters, so we could keep the water temperature at 81 degrees. And we swam that winter of 2020 outdoors with probably half the team. And we still swim. I still keep an outdoor pool and use it to train with some of the, Bruce is outdoors probably 2 days a week. Tim Kelly with his group. So we try to keep the older kids out there. We were swimming mornings and afternoons in 2020. Now, we don't swim in the mornings anymore when it's 22 degrees. We mostly use it in the afternoons, but I've kept one. But yeah, that sort of did prepare me. I knew I had to come up with an out-of-the-box solution to how we keep these kids in the water. Because we went, 2 months with just doing Zoom calls with the kids, getting them out, getting them doing exercises until everything opened up. Many of us went on we teamed with RMSC, which is a big team, which is a municipal team. We went to the county and put a presentation on to the county council on how we could swim. These kids could swim by separating them, starting them half in the pool, one at one end, one at the other, and keeping them 15 feet apart. And they're in chlorine. First summer, we took one of our 50-meter pools and we split it down the middle. So we had 14 lanes and we put 2 kids in each lane. And they weren't allowed to open, so we were able to rent it all morning from them. So it prepared me to think, let's think outside the box and come up with a way that we can keep these kids swimming until we can get back to some normalcy.
For USC Swimming, talking to the main office, it was all about capacity and the loss of capacity. Because during the pandemic, a lot of teams were renting water, and aquatic directors realized, hey, we could just cut them. So we went from a little over 3,000 down to 2,600 plus?
2,600 plus, I think.
And so we lost a lot of capacity. You didn't lose capacity. You found new water.
Correct.
Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I wouldn't, these kids wanted to swim, their parents wanted to swim. I just came up with a creative way. We had all these, we have a big summer league contingent in the Washington, D.C. area. Many of them have heaters, or I put in heaters. I was willing to put in heaters. I mean, from a standpoint of getting enough kids in the water, that's a small expense if it's piped right, so we could do it. But yeah, a lot of these summer league clubs needed the money, right? They're only open 3 months out of the year, and they all want to redo their pools at some point or have redone them and are carrying a lot of debt. So for them, I've had more of them come to me wanting me to rent because they see it helps their bottom line and helping them put money away.
It's running the business. Are you looking at cost per head, cost per square foot? Is that always at top of mind? Is that your thinking as the chief executive?
I'd go nuts thinking about that with all the different programs we have and the cost of the competitive side, right? The margins in the competitive aren't as good as if you just had swim schools. Mike and Tracy probably do a great job with what they do with those swim schools down there, and they can also have the competitive. But up here, I look at numbers in the lane and how many kids we got in the program, and then look at the total revenue from a site and what's our expense side on that. I look at it more, I think, globally than trying to drill down into cost per head or hours. Because, I try to, and I think Bruce will tell you that. I'm not going to say no. If he tells me he needs something, I'm going to figure out how we do it.
You have this long history of producing big stars. This goes back decades. And of course, the biggest star we'd say is Katie Ledecky. In terms of,
well, we got to mention Tom Dolan. I don't know.
You got to mention Tom Dolan. I talked to Tom I hadn't talked to Tom. I don't go 2 months without a phone call to Tom.
Good.
But in terms of coaching, if I'm coming out of college in my 20s and I want to be a coach and I want to develop my career, and I get into the NCAP ecosystem, what does that do for your career? How do you mentor these coaches and bring them along, develop their careers?
We're going to start them off, in the younger ages. I want them to learn how to coach an 8 and under as well as coaching an 11, 12, and then in high school. They got to learn how to coach the younger kids with good stroke technique, because if we don't teach the 8 and unders and 10 and unders good stroke technique, good pushing off the walls, good streamlining, then they're not going to make it to a Jeremy Lin or Pete Morgan or Tim Kelly. I try to find it as we find the younger coaches, and I'm on this point with these guys trying to tell them, okay, guys, we have, we're not getting any younger. We got to decide when we're going to get out, because we got new guys that we want to get in there that want to take it on for the next 15 years. Jeremy, Chris Natoli, Tim Kelly's been around, but bringing up the ones that are under them to give them an opportunity to be a head coach of a senior. Some of them luckily don't want to coach the seniors. I've got, a Mary Dowling who has been with us for 20 some years, or even probably back further than that, who swam for the club. And she does a great job with the age groupers, 12 and unders, and doesn't really, at least has never told me she wants to be a senior level coach. She loves teaching and does an excellent job at it. And so you got to find that mix, right, of those ones that want to do that, want to teach swimming and see their kids. She worked with Phoebe, and, I sent her to trials to see Phoebe swim. So you got to find that right mix of coaches that just want to work with the younger ones and teach them up and move them on.
Phoebe is Phoebe Bacon, if anybody's out there and they're wondering who Phoebe is. How many sites do you have?
12.
You get 12 sites.
Yeah.
So as the chief executive with your 12 sites,
and I'll give you this.
You're not going to 12 sites a day. Where's the hub? What is it? How do you?
Tyson's Corner, where there is a swimming pool. We have a swimming pool there of an old YWCA that was a daycare. And the YWCA couldn't figure out how to make money at a daycare, so it was sold to the Latter-day Saints in 2016. And I thought I was going to lose that pool, but I was luckily able to talk the new owners into letting us stay there. And over the years, they didn't know what to do with it. And we worked with them. So I moved my offices into the old daycare. So we rent the entire building from them. It's a win-win, I think, for them. I'm asked them to see if we can get an extension. They're working on that now. Hopefully they're not going to plan on building a church there anytime soon, but we'll see. But so that's where the hub is. But that does allow me to get to Gear County, Virginia, where Jeremy is, or Loudoun County, Virginia, or into Maryland, where we have the sites in Rockville and American University. So it's sort of centrally located there, and I can get to all of them. I don't go to them all the time. I talk to the coaches probably every day, not all of them, but on the specific day, I'll call and see what we got going on.
How often does someone call in sick and you find yourself on deck?
Luckily, they don't want me on deck, so not too often anymore.
But it did happen at one time.
No, it's yeah. Well, and it happened a lot more. I mean, I remember covering for John Flanagan because they were traveling a lot more, right? John had Andrew Selskar, and they'd have to go to meet, so I'd cover the rest of the group. Tim Kelly, at a backer. Yeah, Bruce doesn't want me touching his group, so I just stay away from him.
Right, does it suddenly become a taper practice? Do you just play battle ball, or when you show up, is that how it works?
That's probably what he thinks will happen. So
I'd be a terrible coach. We played this thing called battle ball when I was a kid at the Johnson Memorial Y with this coach Frankie Bell, and every so often, when she trained us really hard, but every so often we would play battle ball, and we would beat each other to death playing battle ball. And I was like, if I'm ever a coach, we're going to be playing battle ball 3 or 4 days a week.
4 days a week, right? Yeah.
But so probably a good thing that I'm not a coach. So I want to get a little bit granular here, and you can say, hey, Mel, that's none of your business. At USC Swimming, we have 577 private clubs, and we have 813-ish hybrid clubs. Hybrid clubs being some, the team might be a nonprofit, but they also own a pool that's a private part. The nonprofit rents from the pool. So what is NCAP? Is NCAP a private or a hybrid, or what is NCAP?
It's a private subchapter S to me at this point.
So you are running a business, and from in your opinion, what I would like to know is what's the most successful model. If I ask Joel Shinnefield, head of sport development, he's pulling data from this. They're trying to understand where success is. He's like, we don't know. It depends on the community. Each community might be different, but I don't know that I can say right now that a private program is more successful than a hybrid or a full parent-run nonprofit. And I find that interesting because my gut would tell me a private club would be far more successful.
I think it is. I think, look, the three people, including me, that you've interviewed, Chris, Mike, all private, right? Chris has built a tremendous business down there in Atlanta. And, he has competitors. Dynamo is very well thought of, very well run. But Chris has done a great job down there running a business, and their models are a little bit different than mine. I know both Dynamo and Atlanta had pool company contractors, right? That was part of their business during the summer. They'd run pools. I don't want any part of that.
My club coach at MAC, before it was SwimMac, was Jeff Gackel, and he got into their pool management business. It was good for him.
Yeah. I mean, it can be good if you know what you're doing, but that let's talk about labor intensive and dealing with young teenagers as lifeguards. Hard enough dealing with 60 coaches. But I think Joel's right in this. It's really the area that you're in and how you can be successful. I mean, look at a club like Nova, Virginia. I mean, they're a parent-run board, seem to be very successful at what they do. They built a new 50-meter pool. They're getting ready to add a mezzanine. So I think it depends who you have. I mean, I would tell, and I went to Mike Koleber's first seminar that we used to put on at USA Swimming about owning your own club and listening to everything that he did. I tell the parents that are involved is stay out of the way. Help the coach run the club, but let the coach coach, and you look at the financial side and what you're doing, but don't get involved in the coaching aspect of what you're trying to do as a swim club.
Something that Mike did not say in his podcast, but he said to me just on deck, and I think I can share this publicly, is that he goes, I in his private program, he goes, I interface with the parents. Yeah. And I try to keep the coaches focused on the pool, and I manage that relationship. And that relationship is the customer service.
Yeah.
Is that similar at NCAP?
Yeah. Luckily, I have my daughter that deals a lot with the parents. I mean, I still have the coaches. I need the coaches to be talking to their parents. I want them to have that open line of communication. We get involved when it needs to be escalated up if there's something that the coach can't solve, right? If it's financial, if it's what's going on or how's the kid swimming, and then we have to get involved. But so that's a mix on our side. We do a lot in the office. I look at my job, Mel, as I'm an athletic director, but I only have one sport I got to deal with, and that's swimming. I don't have to worry about basketball. I don't have to worry about hockey. I don't have to worry about girls softball. I got swimming to deal with. So I focus on pool contracts, human resources, working with my daughter on human resources, finding the right coaches, working with USA Swimming to make sure we're doing what they need us to do. I mean, we've been a gold medal club for long, and that's something that we want to make sure we do. Get kids to the highest level of sport. And I said when I was on the board, I mean, USA Swimming, we have two mantras, right? Winning medals for the United States of America and developing athletes. And the two aren't necessarily aligned. We have to figure out how to do both if we're going to continue to have our dominance in the sport of swimming across the world.
So this brings us to part of this conversation where it has to concern you. I know that you're not having issues, or I'll let you explain this. Registration. So 2016, Michael Phelps retires. 17 to present day, we're seeing changes in our registration that are part of it was impact from the pandemic. There's a lot of other forces that are bearing down on registration and participation in the sport of swimming. But we as a sport, you're old enough and I'm old enough to know that since 1972, Mark Spitz to Michael Phelps, we went from AAU to USS to USA Swimming.
Right.
We were growing. Our small years were 1.9%. And it rose to 11.9%, depending on the quad. Each quad would go like this. And it was pretty consistent. It's not been consistent.
No, it hasn't been.
So what are we missing?
I'd always question Pat Hogan years ago when he was at USA Swimming. What is our saturation point? Where is that? Because, in listening to your podcast with Mike and others that I've talked to on the CAC, as I'm liaison for the zone Directors Council with the Coaches Advisory Council. So I listen in on their meetings. One of my concerns is that we're diluting the sport down too much, right? We're supposed to be a competitive swim organization, and we are supposed to develop swimmers and have 26 men and 26 women on an Olympic team every 4 years and on a world championship team every other year. We have to continue to focus on developing swimmers at the highest level of the sport. I know you worked hard to get to do what you did in the Olympics, but we have to be able to adapt to what's going on with the kids today. Find those ones that want to work that hard, that are dedicated. I looked up, one of our big mantras is our 6 our mission statement and our core values, right? That's important to the nation's capital swimming, and we drill that into the kids' heads that are there to be a competitive swimmer. I mean, we try to do it where if you're an 8 and under, I only want you practicing 2 days a week. I want you playing basketball. I want you to play softball. I want you to do other sports. When you get to 12, you got to take it a little more serious. You're going to be 4 days a week. And when you get to 13 or 14, you're going to do 5, and you're probably going to do 2 dry lands. So figure out what you want out of the sport and whether you're willing to commit that much time to what we're going to try to do. But if you want to continue to improve, unfortunately, as you know, being a 2 flyer, you got to swim. And if you don't, you're not going to get any better. But I think the things that our coaches worked on, I took them off of our website: competitive excellence, accountability, dedication, leadership, mentorship, and diversity. And those are all things that we as this coaching staff try to focus on with these athletes every day and what they're doing. But I think we have to figure out in USA Swimming how we manage. I mean, look, learn to swim is a big part. And we started it with the foundation. You were very involved with the foundation for years. How far down do we go as a national governing body? I had the thought process, I think, when I got off the board and we were going through a couple of years ago with the USOPC holding our feet to fire on being accountable to the Ted Stevens Act and getting more of our gold medal athletes involved in the governance of the sport, where we know they don't have the time or don't want to get involved in that part. Let's break it off. Let's break age group swimming out of the NGP, create another nonprofit that they just, and that way USOPC doesn't tell us what to do. I mean, although I think safe sport is a very important part of what we do to keep these kids safe, dealing with the Center for Safe Sport is terrible. We do a better job as an NGB than they do.
Their budget is pretty strained. And it's also
terrible that Congress put this thing together and didn't give them any money.
They're strained. Their parameters are pretty broad. And anybody who has any insight into this, if you guys are listening, going, hey, we went through this black swan event where decades and decades and decades we had sex abuse cases come up because people were bringing cases, and many of them went back to the 80s, 70s, some of the late 60s. Now, most of that's cleared out, and now a lot of safe sport cases are bullying.
Correct.
And that's really muddied the waters, and it's gotten, bullying is something that's a cultural thing where your leader takes care of it, and it was taken care of in that ecosystem, in that community.
Right.
But
it's mostly what we deal with at our level, and we're better off dealing with that than going to the Centers for Spaceport. And I can call Liz Hahn if I have a question on how we're dealing with a kid who has been bullying somebody, and whether we suspend them, whether we throw them off the team, or work with their parents, or get the 2 kids together and get it worked out. But to have the Centers for Safe Sport get involved in that is just stupid, in my opinion.
It's a quagmire. The kids, but for anybody out there listening, this is really a thing now. So most of the sex abuse cases are cleared out. It's never going to be fully cleared out.
No.
It's always going to exist in society, but safe sport has now become a backlog of bullying cases.
Yeah. And
bullying is very interesting now because bullying isn't necessarily a traditional someone being mean. They could be being mean on social media, and it can be a bullying case. Right. So it's become a quagmire. You said something interesting. You said maybe we should have a separate governing body that pulls us outside of the USOPC umbrella. You floated that's an idea. That's like, hey, maybe this would be a solution, is to separate the two. Is that something?
It didn't get any traction at that point from anybody.
No, here's the thing. I don't think it would ever get traction. I understand, as someone who's a club owner, why you would want it. It makes absolute sense. And frankly,
Well, I'm just saying, you can put another, look, USOPC doesn't care what we do with the foundation. And that's just a nonprofit as part of USA Swimming, which is the parent nonprofit. We could start another nonprofit that just deals with age group swimming, that these kids are not members of the NGB until they hit a sectional level qualifying time. Something as simple as that. And that way we run them separately. We deal with them from a safe sport level, but we're not under all this microscope of USOPC and telling us what we need to do, and keep some of the athletes involved in governance at the local level.
It's an interesting proposition. And if I brought that question to to Chris Davis would say, well, there's no need to do that. We have AAU. We should do it.
Chris has AAU, but as you and I talked about before, there are parts of this country that AAU is not even existing, right?
Yeah, well, I can play devil's advocate with that. You know, you and I are both old enough to know everything was AAU.
Everything was AAU.
And we both know that if AAU's registration rises to 20, 30, 40,000, suddenly we're going to have AAU events everywhere because it will make sense.
Yeah, but we've already started that, and what I think, trying to get Chris back involved with Block Party, with R9, with what we got passed 2 years ago about having less officials, having a path for somebody who's got an 8 and under and wants to be involved in the sport that is not going to take them 2 years to become a referee.
So people that are out there understand what's going on. They're not going to know what this is. You're of course, you've always been involved in leadership. You've been a volunteer and you've supported the sport. But Tom is referencing Block Party, which is essentially the college dual meet version for
Correct.
Young swimmers. The 2-hour swim meet, really a 90-minute swim meet. That idea came from Julie Bachman out of the Texas LSC. She took it. She shared that with the head of sport development and our former chief executive, Tim Henchy, and their faces went white because that should have been something that was developed internally at USA Swimming. And they said, hey, let's acquire you. They did that. And it's taken a while to roll this out. And most people don't know what Block Party is.
Yeah, we're still getting all the LSCs to buy into the idea of let's make it. It's like you take a kid, when our kids are younger, get them on a soccer team. And when they have a couple practices, they play a game, and it's an hour game on a Saturday. If we're going to get the younger kids involved in this sport, we can't have it be a 4-hour meet on Saturday and Sunday. So we created this way of Block Party to help get newer officials involved, right? They can be a stroke and turn. They don't have to they don't have to do as many sessions before they take the test and move up. We can weed them out and make sure we get good ones. But really to get the younger kids, 12 and unders, into a sport that takes 90 minutes, have fun. We can do it. They can do it at a practice the way we've got it set up. It doesn't have to be on a Friday, a Saturday or Sunday. It can be Thursday afternoon at practice. All right, we're going to do, a meet and do the 50 free and the 50 back. So trying to just get them stay involved or get them to love the sport and do it without having to spend all weekend at a swimming pool.
Block Party is the 2-hour solution. Everybody wants we want to go to breakfast, go to a 2-hour swim meet, and then go to the pizza party. And I am extremely frustrated and angry. I hate the name. I love Julie Bachman. I think it's fantastic. I think we should have had this a couple generations ago. Bad name.
Yeah.
Can't sell it. Takes too long to create saturation in the marketplace for people to understand it. If you want to gamify it, make it fun, sell it to the base, sell it to coaches. It's an uphill battle. It's terrible. If you search Block Party on the web, you're never going to find it.
No.
So to me, that's a leadership issue. And I think that if we were going to make it successful, we should move like a roof is on fire.
I don't disagree. I mean, we use it at Nation's Capital for our mini meets, right? Our 10 and under meets, and it works well for us. But yeah, we got to get more people doing it and get these younger kids involved and love the sport, and then move them on up through the process. But even our other meets, for our full level meets, we got to figure out how to do them quicker and not have families at a swimming pool for 4 hours.
Yes. It's a huge problem, and people don't have time. We live in a society where everything is instantaneous.
Right.
It
worked during COVID, right? We couldn't have spectators in the buildings. We run 2-hour meets and get out.
You treat the parents of your athletes. They're your customers.
Correct.
Does USA Swimming treat clubs in the ecosystem like customers? Do they service them like customers?
I think they're trying now. I mean,
when did they start trying?
I think we've gone through different iterations. I think Chuck, Chuck Wilgus knew the clubs were his customers. I think Tim came in and had to learn that. Like he had to learn.
Good man. You're a gracious man.
How to deal with the officials. And I think Joel, we started 3 years ago, and you and I spent many a beer with Tim Henchy. We Bob Vincent and I spent a lot of time with him trying to get him to realize what would work. And we finally, I think the light bulb went off with him, and we put together this group of coaches that met with him 3 or 4 times a year. It really started during COVID, where, Ginny Nussbaum, myself, Mike Koleber was invited, Chris Davis was invited, John Roy, a bunch of us were invited to sit down and talk about what do we need to be doing. And I think that light bulb went off, and tried to keep that up as that transition went on. But now, until we've been a year without a CEO, right? Going on a year.
It's so we can bring everybody in. A lot of people might not be aware. Tim Hinch was brought in as our chief executive after Chuck Ugast in 2017. Tim swam. He's from our culture. Swam all the way through college, D1. Was a 429 500 freestyler, 426. He was, but he was in the professional sports world and had a great resume, and everyone was very excited about him. The board brought him in to really elevate trials. That was a big part of his charge. And what he found coming from the professional world was that he kept butting up against clubs in this other piece. And he didn't learn until probably too late that these clubs were very powerful, and the clubs wanted more service. And that was exacerbated. And he eventually was removed as chief executive. And that was August of 30th of 2024. And we're about 339 days into its search, third round for a new chief executive. Just so if anybody needed a little update.
Thank you for that history.
Was that did I represent that correctly?
You hit it now on the head. Now, I mean, I think you and I are looking at this board saying, come on, guys, what are we doing?
You have board experience.
Yes.
Help me understand how we've gotten to this place. We're in a domestic Olympic run-up. We have the Los Angeles Games in 2028. We're old enough to know what 84 did for the sport of swimming. It was extraordinary. Yep. It was great for registration. It was great. It was a boon. We have wasted a year of the squad.
I agree.
Looking for a leader. How does that happen? Because I've not served on the board, but you have. How does that happen?
Loss of focus, loss of what their job is. I think there are people on that board that don't get what you and I do every day and trying to develop, you getting the word out about swimming, me working with our coaches on developing swimmers. This board was changed in 2017, right when Tim was hired, right? It used to be a 30-person board when Chuck Ugast was CEO, that you had all the past board chairs in the room. You had all these you had the YWCA in there. You had all these people. We did a whole reorganization, and it came down to 15 people that were going to be on this board. And some of them were what they called at large, did not have a particular set in swimming. They were from the outside, which is a model that's worked for the USOPC. And then some of us, coaches, athletes. And the first set of board, when I was on it, we understood our goal. Our mission was to be at 30,000 feet, to listen to our staff, who was to set the agenda. The CEO ran the organization, came up with what needed to be done, presented it to the board, and we either approved it or said, no, I think we're going in the wrong direction. Let's rethink this and go this way, or you come back to us with some other options. This board has gone back to what the old board used to be. They want to be operational. They want to run the whole thing. Well, why do we have 70 people in Colorado Springs?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. But this board has, I think, look, you and I have known Chris Brereton. I think Chris has not done great leadership for this board, and we need to get it straightened out and get it straightened out quick.
I swam at the University of Tennessee. Chris Brereton swam at the University of Georgia. Chris Brereton, so I've known him for a long time. Chris Brereton, just for anybody out there, he's our board chair. It was formerly used to be president of USA Swimming, who changed it to board chair. Brereton has had a great career, rose to become the COO of MGM, then helped broker the sale of MGM to Amazon Prime. He was the EVP of streaming at Amazon, and COO. Now he's a partner at the Russo brothers. And if you would like to have a little fun trick, go Google the Russo brothers, because you will enjoy seeing who they are and what they're about, because they're power players in Hollywood. Chris is an incredibly sophisticated guy. Yeah. I think he's been extremely busy with his career. I think that I know from personal engagement with him that he would say what you're saying. as a board should be 60,000 feet.
But
We should let the CEO run with the football, and he should offer guidance and oversight, but not get involved. And I think that this board got really deep in the weeds.
yes,
And I don't think that he got control of it back until about May of this year.
I would agree with that.
And but I think he's got his arms around it now.
I do too. But he's on his way out, and he's going to turn it over to Natalie Codlin, who we got to hope is ready to deal with this and keep this board where they need to be once we put in a new CEO. Because you're right, we've lost a year.
We've lost a year. This is what people need to know, just that I think would find interesting. They probably are unaware of the situation. Tim was removed. Tim was, I don't know how you would calculate. In Tim's defense, we got to say this. His charge was to elevate trials, and he did. He put in a football stadium. We did that. I think our high was 23,000 at one point. It might have been higher. So the biggest audience we've had in person at an event. And he did that. But he already had this problem with clubs and coaches, and that really was a big part of the reason why he was removed and left. A board member wanted to make themselves interim CEO very soon after that, and that did not happen. They lifted Shanna Ferguson to be interim CEO. Shanna Ferguson left because she was on the short list to be CEO, and then realized that was not really happening. So she's now at LA organizing. And Rob Vincent, who I think a lot of people do respect, was a board member who stepped off and is now our second interim CEO. I think knowing the facts is good to know.
I agree. I mean, and I think you stated that right. I mean, I think Chris has, he and I have had some conversations on that, and hopefully he's got this board under control. They are going to interview 2 candidates, I believe, on Monday. Hopefully one of those they like, and we can get moving. But as you said, LA 28 is important for this sport. NBC knows how important it is for them. And that goes back to what we talked about with Michael. Chuck knew what he was doing, Wilgus, and he had Michael for all those years, and he and Ebersol took a run on it and elevated the sport to where we are today. And you and I can argue about how we sell it more, right? But every 4 years, we are NBC's biggest draw for 2 weeks, trials and then the Olympics. And it's amazing how many people watch that, and what we did in Indianapolis in 2024, and hopefully what we can do again. I do believe it's been announced we're going back there, correct? So we'll see what we can do and be that. But you're right. Michael brought swimming to the map and did an excellent job with the years that he swam and he is the greatest of all time. Katie certainly has kept the women's side, and we have a great women's team, right? Watching all those young women swim as well as they have been swimming. And now we got a very young men's team, and hopefully Greg and Yuri can do a great job with the national team over the next 3 years.
I have a huge problem with our quad schedule and the marketing of it. I do not like that our business is small in the non-Olympic years, and that we don't market our sport and drive it more, and that we have this one big balloon year because of this. Yeah. That infuriates me. I think it's lazy. I think it lacks vision. And no one has shown me a different way.
Well, maybe you and I can have a meeting with the new CEO whenever they pick him.
They're going to pick. So the board is this something else. Everyone should know this. And I'll say here, I was the first person to interview for chief executive, and in late 2024. I thought that I would be late in the process. I waited as long as possible, but I'm old. I'm a former Olympian. I own a business in swimming. I'm throwing my name in that. I'm throwing my name in the ring. I thought that you had interviewed, and that is not true. Let's put that rumor to bed. You did not interview.
No, I did not.
And I just for going inside baseball, people like podcast. I cannot out my peers. So I'm the first Olympic champion in 45 years to interview for the position. But after me, when they did the second round and the third round, 4 more Olympic medalists stepped up. None of them made it past the search committee.
Yeah, I don't understand that, really.
This board, it is based on my intelligence and understanding. They are really interested in bringing in talent from outside of the swimming culture. How do you feel about that?
I don't think it's good, quite frankly. I mean, when Chris, no, people don't really know this, but when Bob was chairman and Chris decided to put his name in to be the next chairman because Bob was rolling off, I said, at that time I was vice chair of fiscal oversight. I said, I don't think we're ready to have an outside person be the board chair. So I put my name in, and Chris and I ran against each other to be board chair. It took 7 votes before they could, the rest of the board votes on who's the board chair is going to be. And Bruce Gemmel was on the board as steering. He had to take his name out because he worked for me. So we were down to 14 votes, right?
We shouldn't have done that. Why did we do that?
No choice. The damn lawyers. That's what
Shouldn't have done that. You got to game the system. You got to move with your own people, Tom. You're building a coalition here.
So it took 7 votes because it was an even number, right? 7-7 came out for 2 hours, of voting, and finally somebody changed their vote and went to
somebody capitulated. They leaned it. So
Chris gave him a movie contract or something. I don't
give him a movie contract. Now, for the record out there, we have to say this journalistically. That was a joke. He is teasing. But if that were true, that'd be awesome.
But no, and I respect Chris to the nth degree. I can have had many conversations on what I wanted to see him succeed and do this. I just think his board has lost their way in what their mantra should be in being, as you say, even 60,000 feet and helping our staff make sure we're doing the right things for the kids in this sport.
Let me put a pause in this right now because you said something and people might not quite get it. You ran against Chris Brereton to be board chair.
Yeah.
And it was a close vote and Chris got it.
Yeah.
And Chris is an impressive outsider. And a lot of people don't understand the concept of outsider. Like, wait a minute, Chris swam through college and his kid swims and he's in the culture. Most people might not understand the splitting hairs on this. And tell me if I'm representing you incorrectly. I have a term for this. I call them pedestrians. This is what a pedestrian is. Okay, you were in the sport, then you were out of the sport, and maybe partly you were back in the sport, and then you're going to be out of the sport. If you're not there every day, you don't wake up, put your feet on the ground, and this is what I'm thinking about every day, you're not in the sport. You're a pedestrian. You're walking in, you're walking out. Correct. You're walking in, you're walking out. And there's a certain level of knowledge that's just in your skin that happens when this is what you do all the time.
I'm responsible. Yeah, I'm responsible for 60 full-time coaches every day.
Yeah.
In this sport. I got to make sure I can make payroll every 2 weeks. And that's being involved in this sport and working with kids, working with parents, and understanding what do we have to do to make this NGB the best NGB in the world.
Yes, that's right. It's my term, just so anybody knows. I call them, and it's a little derogatory. I call you a pedestrian. Love that you were in the sport and you participated, right? But if you're not doing it every day, and I think people forget about that. We forget about this. The coach is the one that wakes up, puts their feet on they get out of bed, put their feet on the ground, and they're thinking about it. They're probably thinking about it when they're sitting in bed. This was my concern with bringing in an outside chief executive in a domestic Olympic quad. Something that really I have a problem with. It makes me angry. I have emotion about it. Well, this is the anger. The anger is this. We're going to pay an enormous salary to a chief executive because they're talent, and they're going to take 3 to 4 years to learn the culture, and it's going to take about that long.
Easily. It took Tim Hinchy that long, and he swam.
But remember, he's a pedestrian. He was in it. He walked out of it. Came back in it.
No, you're right. It took Tim. And I think we talked to him, he'd admit it. It took him 3 years to figure out this sport.
Tim's savvy. Tim's a smart guy. Tim is a sharp knife. Tim he gets it. Tim got it. He's interesting, excited, and Tim is creative.
Right.
He was.
Right. And the problem this chief executive, unfortunately, is going to have is his staff is not there, right? Tim's staff, Shayna, who did Olympic trials for the last one in Indianapolis, she's gone. Eric Skufka, the CEO, just resigned. So he'll be gone. So this person is going to have to rebuild a leadership team to figure out what we've got to do in 3 years.
Yeah, it's unusual. We lifted it. Typically, when you bring in a CEO, they'd bring in their COO, and we lifted a COO before hiring a CEO. A COO is like your wife.
Right.
It is like your right-hand person. So that's very interesting. There's a lot of questionable things that the board has done that I'm sort of scratching my head over. But my big rub is we're paying a lot of money. And if you bring somebody from the outside in, they're going to take 3 years to learn this business.
I don't.
Okay. And we don't have that time, not in a domestic Olympic run-up.
No.
And so we're going to hold their feet to the fire and say, you need to learn fast.
Yeah, and I hope we find the right person and they do well, and that we can all help them that are involved in the sport and make our living in doing this sport, whether it's me, Mike, Chris, John Roy, those of us that have been involved in leadership and still are. Our job now has got to be to help that person learn quickly and get the right people in so that we do show off right in LA in 2028. But going back to your question, I don't know what the answer is across I think we have to break down this. My big thing, even when I was on the board, was we are still trying to run this organization like we are the AAU.
Interesting.
We haven't changed the governing structure of this organization at all. We have 58 LSCs. We lost one because 2 combined. But the demographics of this country have changed over those 50 years. Shouldn't we be really looking at how we are governing this sport and where we need to put resources and where we don't, because they're in good shape? We're very volunteer heavy, and how we are running the sport is fractionalized all over the country.
LSU's have come up quite a bit, well, with Chris Davis in particular, not necessarily Mike Koleber. How do you feel about your local swim committee? Do you like them? Do you like interfacing with them? Is it a fast process? Do you not like it?
I was a general chair for 4 years of it. Yes, it's the way we're built, right? I have to be able to address them. Now, I have a bigger problem with some of my neighbors, because in Potomac Valley, which is the Washington, D.C. area, that LSC, again, was developed, 1955? And at that point, that LSC was made up of Washington, D.C., Fairfax County, Virginia, Montgomery County, Maryland, and Prince George's County, Maryland. So 3 jurisdictions.
Wait. So NCAP is across how many LSCs? You're not in one LSC?
No, I'm in one, but
Okay.
I swim in another one.
Okay.
Right? Because I have sites in Loudoun County, Virginia.
Okay.
And this is going to come up this year at the House of Delegates, because Virginia Swimming wants to control pools that they don't have any clubs in. Loudoun County is now a bedroom community of Washington, D.C., right? You know where it is.
Yes.
Right next to Fairfax down Route 66. All the teams have practiced, and the county has built 3 50-meter pools. All the teams that swim in those pools are Potomac Valley teams. And when we run a meet, we have to sanction it through Virginia.
You had a problem with that?
I do, because they want to charge, $1.50 for their scholarship fund, which our swimmers can't even apply for. So they're putting a tax on our swimmers to be able to run a swim meet in Loudoun County.
So we don't have some uniformity LSC to LSC.
No.
And that's
I'm get along very well, but right now Potomac Valley and Virginia are trying to get this worked out, but it's going to have to go to legislation because Virginia doesn't want to give in.
How big would USA Swimming be if we had all LSC money aggregated under one umbrella?
Oh my God. You'd have to ask Eric. I've been out of it too long, but there's a lot of money sitting in from zones and LSCs that is pretty substantial.
Can you make an argument for, hey, it's great that we have these local swim committees. We have these funds sitting here, and it's like in an insurance policy, store of value. Something goes wrong, we got that. We've got our local swim committee's got money.
Yeah, when I was vice chair, we'd have meetings. Eric Skufka and I would have meetings with the finance chairs of all these LSC, and we'd tell them, you guys got all this money in the bank. Spend it on your athletes.
Where are they spending?
Wait, what are we hoarding this money for?
What are they spending it on?
Nothing. They want to hoard money. They want to just get the bank account bigger for some reason. Now, some of it was good during COVID. Some of them did a very good job of giving money to clubs to help them survive and everything else. But the question is, how much do you need?
Okay, that is sort of the American way. You're a university. You're a foundation. You're trying to build a massive endowment so that it gets big enough so that cream that comes off the top, even you take some cream off the top, it keeps growing.
I mean, nothing wrong.
That is what
We have a lot of good people in LSCs that have the right attitude and are doing the right things, but we got to get everybody to focus on, we're in this to help athletes become better.
Okay.
Period. And that's what we need to focus on. And I think we need to, as an organization, look at how do we govern ourselves? And are we using a system that is too old for the way that the sport needs to be run now?
I want to know how you would change it.
I'm still thinking about that. Check back with me in our next podcast.
That sounds good. What if, just play the what if game. What if AAU developed and became, let me preface it by saying this. I'm going to say this. Early 2000s, diving clubs got a little bit frustrated with USA Diving. They didn't feel they were being serviced. And they, over a 2 to 3 year period, most of them defected back to AAU because they had been at AAU before 1970 and 1979. So in the early 2000s, and they left. Now in diving, it is cultural. It is like if you dive as an age group or you develop through AAU, and if you're on the track of being a D1 diver or being an elite, you join USA Diving. So that could happen. If that did happen, would that be bad for the sport? In swimming, if that happened in swimming, would that be bad for the sport?
I don't know the answer to that. I would think yes, and I think we need to figure that out and do the right thing for all of our athletes. I don't know that it does any good to have two governing bodies. It's almost like what we're talking about in taking our younger athletes out of the NGB so that we don't have all this USOPC structure over top of them and run it ourselves. But, the big thing is insurance, right?
True.
That's the big thing. And AAU gives the opportunity for clubs to be able to get insurance for their kids. If you have them in USA Swimming, it's about the insurance for these clubs to make sure that if anything does happen, that we have them insured, whether they break an arm or in a car accident on the way to a meet, that they're covered.
So help me understand something. I got a little bit of a blind spot here, and I think I might be able to answer this.
Yeah.
Reinsurance, offshore. We had our own insurance.
We did.
We had a war chest of money, and we were our own insurer because it was challenging. It was something we desperately needed back in the early 80s. We
couldn't get insurance.
Couldn't get insurance. And, no one wants to insure kids in bathing suits at pools and on slippery decks.
Yeah.
It's not good business.
It wasn't at that point. It wasn't in 1980. You're right.
And so people understand the sex abuse cases started coming out, and we started we were doing payouts, and the payouts came from our war chest of money, which was our reinsurance company, which, if I understand correctly, was headquartered in Barbados, which is what a lot of nonprofits did. They headquartered offshore because it was advantageous in protecting.
You didn't have it, and you didn't have to have as much money as you do in the United States.
But we had a war chest.
We built it up over the years.
Yeah. How much more cost efficient was it to have that war chest when it was operational and full and healthy compared to what we're living in now, which is we're on the open market?
Again, I've been out of it for too long, but I was made treasurer of the insurance company when we brought it back on shore. When Jim Sheehan was board chair, he disbanded the USIC Barbados. Again, it was sort of
you got too low.
What was going on was it was all the old board chairs were board members of USIC, and they have nice little meetings offshore and everything else. And we finally changed that, and they brought it back on shore. We were able to organize it in the District of Columbia. Jim asked me to be the treasurer of that, to watch over the payouts and what we were doing. And at that point, we were in pretty good shape. But I think I wasn't on the board at that time, but yeah, they saw all the payouts coming, or the lawsuits, and we were handling them. We had a group handling them. I thought they were doing a very good job. We didn't have that big of payouts. We had plenty of money, but we decided to sell the insurance company to another insurance company, and we took the $14 million and put it in our net assets.
And you can see that in their financials that are released, and it's pretty good.
All those have been paid out. We're done with that. And there were some, bad ones. We had some that needed to be cleaned up, and I think we've gotten it all cleaned up, and it's unfortunate, as in any business. And I think I believe we have it under control. It's hard. The hard part about our system is, right, we have all these people, coaches, clubs, everything else. They're not employees of USA Swimming. And if they do something, that's incorrect, who gets sued?
The United States Swimming.
Yeah.
Yes, that's something that I've never said publicly. I probably should say publicly. I think it was a bit of a cold bucket of water in the face for Henshey when he realized, wow, I don't have any quality control over this community. But if something goes wrong, we're going to be sued. And I think that was, and he at a certain point was like, I didn't take this position to be a managing partner of a law firm. And I thought I was going to be a chief executive of a sports franchise.
We hired him, and he had to go in front of Congress within the first couple of months, right? And I actually, because I'm in D.C., I went down there with him and Bob Vincent, who was board chair at that time, and sat and watched him get grilled, where he wasn't involved in any of this stuff and took the high road and talked about what we're trying to do. And I think we have done a great job with Liz Hahn and her staff and Safe Sport in trying to help these clubs do the right thing for our athletes. They don't deserve to be treated differently. They need to be protected. And we got to make sure we're educating these coaches, right? I think from what I heard, I think we're finally getting to the point where we're rebuilding a good relationship with ASCA so that we can work with them on education and what we're doing with the coaches so that we are creating an environment for these kids that is safe and their parents can trust them being a member of USA Swimming. I've always said, too, I want the parents to be members of USA Swimming because then the parents fall under our rules.
Interesting. I agree. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, but right now they don't. And I think that's something we have to look at and see how do we all communicate better and the parents know what we got to do. And it's hard to get to be a Safe Sport certified club. It's as large as we are, it's hard. We have to get 20% of the kids and the parents to take all the tests.
Those tests should be streamlined, and those tests should be rewritten by someone who understands the culture because I think I've done the test because if I'm doing something and I feel like I'm going to be engaging athletes in a way that's, I've gone through and taken it, and it's weird. It's almost, it needs to be updated. It's clearly written by insurance attorneys.
Yeah. So, it's just things I think we need to work on. As long as I agree with you, we got to look at, and I think the first question we have to ask is, what is the right saturation point? How many kids should be involved in competitive swimming? And I think we have to break it into buckets, Mel. We got to break in competitive swimming is different than developmental swimming is different than swim schools.
Okay.
And what are the right numbers for each one of those? We only put, I look at it, 26 men and 26 women make an Olympic team. Then how many do we have on a national team? Probably, 150?
Across the junior teams?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
200?
Top end, at the very top end.
Right. And we're dealing with a pool of 300,000?
Well, okay. Well, so I want to fully understand this. You're saying, what is the saturation point? Is the saturation point 300,000? Should it be 500,000? Should we have 1 million swimmers? You tell me. I know that you're reaching, if I talk to Koleber's like, hey, Mike Koleber down here in Austin, Texas with Nitro, super team. I have about, he's like, he clearly has his competitive swimmers in a certain band that makes sense to him. And I think that's 1,800. And no, excuse me. I think it says 1,100, and then he has like the intermediates like 700. Right. I'd have to go back and reference that. Same with Chris Davis. He's saying, hey, I kind of have this here. Something tells me you kind of have your numbers kind of locked, and you can keep that number with your competitive athletes.
Yeah.
You don't want it to grow. You're kind of like, I'm at saturation now.
Well, I'll grow it when it makes sense to grow. I'm not going to grow just to grow. Like Loudoun County opened up another 50-meter pool. So we had to split our time between 3 pools. We had them at 2. We had about 330 athletes at those 2 pools. Now I'm looking at registrations now because we start charging tomorrow. That's grown between the 3 because we didn't get as much time at some of the other 2 pools. We're at 390. So I'm going to grow when it makes sense to grow. When we can get lane space, when I have the coaches that can coach these kids, I'm going to be very strategic about where we grow and why we grow, not just to open up another site and put more kids in the pool. Because Bruce Gemmel doesn't want just another swimmer in his pool, in his lanes. I can take some underneath him, for Dory Halby to work with or Phil Kaminsky and get them ready for him but we're going to took the lane space where he's got enough room that he can do the work he wants to do. Same thing with Jeremy. I'm not going to load on kids that are just there to pay the bills.
Okay. I come from the world of, the Olympics, I did all the age group stuff and ascended and I was on a national team for a very, very long time. I've had a business in aquatics, 20 years, swam CEO 14. I am angry because of all that experience. I've seen one marketing campaign from USA Swimming that was a large scale hard press to win the hearts and minds of mothers and fathers to choose the sport of swimming. That was 2013.
Matt Farrell.
Funnest sport.
Matt Farrell.
Funnest sport.
Matt Farrell, who's now the CEO of
figure skating.
Figure skating.
Right. So, but now here's the thing. What I'm hearing from you is like, hey, I want to grow and it makes sense. Now, if you're Mel Stewart and you live in my head, I'm going, I want to grow. I want to grow now. I don't want to ever not grow. I want us to be grow. We had 300,000. I want 1 million.
Bigger isn't necessarily better when you're trying to develop athletes to the highest level of the sport. I can only take on so many and put so many in a lane.
Okay. I'll play this game with you. Yeah. What if demand is ridiculous? Because I think if you're doing your job at the Ivory Tower in Colorado Springs at our headquarters, if you're doing the job, demand is so high, they're lined up out your door, and you can't handle the demand, and you're calling up, going, "Can you guys slow down? Can you ease up?"
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about our sport in this country is. There are pockets, right, where demand is big and we can take on more. Like I said, when we're going to grow, it looks like on mine, 10 to 15% on what we had last year. So yes, I can grow, but I'm going to grow smart. I'm not going to just grow to grow. As I said, again, I said to Pat Hogan years ago when Katie was swimming, stop letting other teams come into Potomac Valley. I need those swimmers to pay for Katie Ledecky to train and go to a national level meet. I got to send Bruce Gemmel with her. So I need the young swimmers and I want to develop them right. I just don't want to put kids' bodies in the pool. But yes, I look at the numbers every day because if I don't have it, I can't pay the coaches. I can't start a 401k for them. I can't pay their health care. But to me, growing bigger is not always better. Grow smart.
Grow smart. Well, I'm beside myself that our registration has down or flat in an Olympic year.
Yes. But I think we have to look, and I think we finally gotten to the point in USA Swimming where we can actually look at data and give us ideas on why that is, or where is the growth and where are we losing them. We have finally, after all these years, we had to rebuild all that data. You and I talked about it. Tim caught a lot of crap for that, the rollout of all the new systems at USA Swimming because we didn't invest the money years ago.
We didn't, just so everybody, Tom is referencing the SWIMS 3.0 database. That's so that you have to register directly with USA Swimming. That allows them to track the data so we can understand what our sport is about. That for anybody who doesn't understand, doesn't know, Chuck Wilgus was talking about that as early as 2002, as far as I remember. Mm-hmm. I've known Chuck since he was hired. He was a previous CEO. So they've wanted to do this forever and no one did it. Hence you ripped the Band-Aid off and got it done. And the rollout was very shaky, made a lot of people angry, but not at nation's capital because you're running a pretty professional organization. You guys were on top of it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a very good staff that they're younger than I am. So they understand the IT stuff better than I do. I don't even touch it because I'll screw it up, but they know it like the back of their hand. We work very closely with Team Unify because it's I remember when I first started getting in this, we were billing and getting people to send us paper checks, right? These new systems allow me to have a credit card on file for everybody and we hit it every month. And I'm not chasing $100,000 at the end of the year because people didn't pay their bill. I'm paying it in bank service charges, but it's a cost of doing business now. So I think we have to roll with the punch, but I'm hoping we're going to get data that can answer those questions and then get us to the point is where do we have saturation? Where don't we? And how do we help those clubs get more swimmers?
Okay, so you've been making references to saturation, but you just got a little more detailed there. You said, as a whole, as a nation, as a governing body, as we know it now, USA Swimming, you have saturation, or you're near saturation. You have some growth. You're saying you got growth this year, but you're like, where are we not have saturation, and how can we improve that? So you acknowledge, hey, there's swaths of the country where swimming is not prominent, and why? And what can we do there?
Right.
Okay.
But where do we have pools, right? I mean, what's South Dakota like? I've never been there. Maybe you and I need to do a tour around the U.S. and figure out where those underserved areas are, right? You know, as you know, look, you came from swimming while you were training in Charlotte, North Carolina. Olympians come from all over the country. We've been very blessed that we've had a number of them come through our program, but there are people on our Olympic team that come from very small. Look at, I can't remember the young lady's name, from Alaska.
Lydia Jacoby.
Yeah, Lydia Jacoby, out of a little club in Alaska, makes the Olympic team in 2021. So they're all over the country we're running great programs all over the country. And whether it's, I can remember our now assistant national team director coming into the office after Katie broke Mary T's 1,000 record, I think at short course nationals in December. And he just says, as we're trying to get her ready for 2012, I just don't want to screw this up, because he was a young coach, but knew he had something special with Katie and did a great job with her.
I'm going to take you off topic. Bruce, I've done some camps with Bruce at the Olympic Training Center, and spent, that situation where you're standing on deck and you're there and you're for 2 or 3 days and you're there 10 hours a day. So I really enjoyed spending time with him. We just did this, we just went through a situation where we selected a national team director. We have Greg Meehan, former head coach at Stanford, great guy. We've seen him in action. We're dealing with a national team right now. World Championships, they're dealing with sickness, and he did what I want a national team director to do. He stepped up and he made a statement on NBC, and I think he represented Team USA well. He did it. He told the truth and he added context. This is where I'm going. There was a long list of coaches on that list. Yeah. National team director, and Bruce was one of them. Uh-huh. Would we be better served having someone like a Bruce who comes from a club program, or do you think we're better served coming through that college program? I mean, because here's the thing. I think Bruce could have done the job.
Oh, I think he could have too. I don't think at that point in his career he wanted it. Aaron's off at Texas.
Yep. He
and I have had many discussions about his career and what he wants to do. And I would never hold a coach back from something that makes sense for them. But yeah, I mean, he was on that short list, but I don't think, and you'd have to have him on a podcast and tell you, but I don't think he necessarily wanted it at that point after being on that board of directors and knowing.
That's right. Bruce served on the board of directors, and it was him, and it was
a steering committee chair.
And Ira Klein, and Ira Klein's really, I love talking to Ira. Ira, I got a problem here. I don't understand something. Explain it to me. He's always great to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
but Yuri has the club experience. He coached for Nations Capital for 8 years, right? So he understood, and he had success. He took Phoebe out of our program. He took 2 or 3 others out of our program. So I think he'll come. He told me they're going to come and visit. They'll do a tour of around. I mean, we've been very blessed. I mean, Frank Bush was national team. He brought himself and a couple of the other staff members out to talk to all of our coaches just to see what we're doing, how we're doing. And I think that's the type of stuff we need to get out of the national team. Understand what the grassroots are doing. But let's face it, most of and you and I brought this up, I mean, we're training the world through our college system. So none of us should be surprised when the rest of the world is catching up to what we're able to do at the elite level.
I agree with that. There's a lot of coaches that agree with that. I can't speak for an Eddie Reese, but if I called up an Eddie Reese and asked him, he might have a few things to say about that. Yeah. But I can push back on that. I can say this, based on our scale of our population and the wealth that's in this nation, I don't think it makes a difference. I think we should be the shining light on the hill, and I still think we should be dominant on the medal stand. I think we have way too much advantage that I understand, but I do understand.
So I don't disagree with you there, but we got to figure out, okay, then where's the disconnect? What do we need to be doing differently to make sure that we should still dominate, even though we are training the world?
I would love to talk to Michael Phelps about this.
I'll be off camera while you talk to Michael.
I want to talk to Michael because I think Michael has opinions. I think Michael is, I can't speak for Michael Phelps, but I can say that he is very invested and wants Team USA to be successful.
Oh, you and I, all of us are, right? So how do we do it? How do we make sure that we can continue to do that? NIL is going to change the face of what college swimming is. And I think we've got 3 years to see what that does.
All right. I've held you for a very, very long time, and I haven't asked you any softball questions. I have to ask you at least one. You could have stayed in the private sector.
Yeah.
You coached early. You left. You did your private sector job. You did it for a long time. You were successful, and you came back to the sport. Why are you in this? What's
swimming? I'm giving back because what swimming did for me as a youngster and then as a college swimmer made me who I am. Okay. Hard worker, dedicated, wanting to get to be the best I could be. And I had a long career. Also, being in business at a direct marketing company at that time where the financial crisis hit. I had to lay out of those 200 people that worked for me. I had to lay off probably 70. And I said to myself, I'd never want to have to do that again. I'm looking people in the face that had worked for a company for 40 years, just doing a line job, making sure inserters were working and getting direct mail out the door, or your Bed Bath & Beyond coupons that you get in the mail. You change their life, right? They were working, and I said to myself, I don't want to do this. And at that point, at that time, luckily, Rick had come back from Australia, learned the swim school business. And I saw him at a funeral of a friend of ours that was one of his swimmers. And I said, you need any help? And he said, yeah, why don't you come back and help me run this business? And I knew he wasn't getting any younger. I just didn't think I was going to have to buy it because of what happened in 2012.
That's not funny. That's not funny. But life is, that's not funny. But life put you on this trajectory. You were put in that position, and you were put in this trajectory, and the success is unquestionable.
And I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I want to set it up for the next group of coaches, Jeremy Lin and his wife, my daughter, that we can continue on this path and help kids that love this sport and want to be involved in it and create a great atmosphere for them.
I've missed something. I've got to ask it. It's an important question. You hinted that you think the private club could be the best model. You want to see the data to see if that really works, if that's the best, because we got a lot of, you can comment on that, but I wanted to ask you this.
Yeah.
Koleber said something, and I meant to ask everybody how important it is to own water. Do you need to own water?
I unlike Michael, luckily in here, I got enough pools. I don't have to own my own water, but building the relationships with private schools, counties, universities, that I can feel comfortable that we have the relationship that they want us there because of our name. It gives them credence into what they're doing is important. Now, that being said, as I sunset out, right, I'm 60. I just finished my application for Social Security, so I'm going to be 67.
I'm the spring chicken on this podcast.
Yeah, I know you are. 67 in October. I'm working with a group down in Fauquier County. I'm going to build a pool in another LSC, so that'll be fun. But building a pool down in Fauquier County where Jeremy and his wife are, then we can have our first facility because we can afford the land. It would be very hard for a private club to build a pool in Fairfax County, Virginia, or Montgomery County because the land you need would cost $2 million before you even break ground. So we're starting on that so that we can have a facility down there. I would have to build 3 with the expanse that we have. So we're going to start down there. I'm going to fund it, make it work so that these young coaches, they can work for the next 25 years and be ready to pass it on to the next group.